My dear storytellers, so many people out in the world are going to tell you what they think about your writing. Sometimes it's going to be because you asked them to tell you, and sometimes they're going to tell you even though you didn't ask. Today, our topic is feedback, the notes we get on our work from other people. Maybe we're getting notes on a project that we've just begun and are in the drafting phase. Maybe we're getting notes from a high stakes gatekeeper in the publishing profession that we really want to please. Maybe, if we're lucky, we're getting notes from readers because our book is finished and published and out in the world. So we might have a different reaction to the kinds of notes we're getting, depending on whether we ask for them, whether they come at us unbidden, and at what stage of the development of our work we are. But the bottom line is, it's often quite emotionally difficult to receive feedback. And when we are in the development stage of our work, this feedback is essential. And sometimes it may be contractually required that we revise our book, taking into account the feedback that we get. Now, this is kind of a behind the scenes topic for me today for reasons that I'm going to explain once we dive in. But I think that everybody can relate to that moment of getting feedback on your work, what it feels like in your body, what it feels like in your mind. And then importantly, like, what do we do with the notes that we get? Do we listen to them all? Do we ignore them all? Like, how do we react? It can be really, really confusing, kind of like the proverbial elephant designed by committee, It can be very confusing to get a lot of feedback on our work. How do we make it into a positive for us so that we feel that it's going to help us make our book better and make us better writers? That's what I want to talk about today. I've got a couple of people in the comments already saying, great topic. Thank you, Simone. Nancy's like, great topic. Thank you, Nancy. And thank you for being here live to talk about this and to contribute your own thoughts, your own experiences about the journey that we go through as writers, getting feedback on our work. Before we dive into all of that, let me introduce myself, because sometimes, people come to the YouTube channel who don't already know who I am, which is thrilling. It's kind of the whole point. My name is Mary Rose Wood. I myself am an author. I'm best known for writing middle grade fiction, which is a form of kid lit or literature for young readers designed for the 8 to 12-year-old reader. But like many writers of stories for younger readers, I tend to have a lot of adult readers as well, which is really, really interesting. I'm also the founder of Path of the Storyteller, which is my own platform for teaching and mentoring writers. And it is primarily in that capacity that I have this YouTube channel that I come live most Wednesdays at 1 p.m. Pacific time to talk about subjects like today's topic. How do we deal with feedback? Everything having to do with story structure, one of my favorite topics, writing craft, and the mindset of the working, thriving writer. That's what we talk about here. Path of the Storyteller is a wonderful community with lots of training and resources for folks who are serious about leveling up their writing and getting to pro level. And one of the things that I like to offer is a little freebie. It's not so little, actually. It's pretty comprehensive. It's a collection of writing prompts. I'm just looking for the link for you guys. There you go. It's a free download. It's a whole collection of writing prompts. There are 30 different writing prompts in it. And what's cool about it, in my opinion, is that it follows story structure. These are writing prompts that are designed to coach you in brainstorming a tale, a plot, a story, whatever you want to call it, from beginning through the middle to the end. So it's not just a random collection of, let's write a little bit today. It's kind of a sneaky way of giving you a crash course in story structure. Story structure is one of the things I'm going to mention today, because guess what? When you get notes on your work, when you get feedback on your work, one of the things that the people who are giving you feedback are going to address is story structure. And you need to know what they're talking about. So go grab that freebie. It'll help, get you familiar with the topic. And I think that that is a really great place to start if you're new to the idea of training as a writer. All right, gang. I am ready to dive in. I see we've got a nice crowd here today. Thank you so much. Let me say hi. Simone and Nancy, I already said hi to. Constanzas here. Fantastic. Anne's here. Lovely, lovely, lovely. Constanza already has a great comment to share. I like to get feedback from others, but not too early in the process of your work. That's right, Constanza. There is a time and a place for feedback. And there is a time and a place for us to be alone with the muse. Am I right? That's one of the things I think we need to talk about today because of the emotional impact that sharing our work has on us. And we are all the same. It doesn't matter if you're a beginner, someone who's published 14 with more to come, and I'm going to reveal a little bit about that today. 14 published novels in my career so far. It doesn't matter where you are in the journey. These needs that we have for like feeling of privacy and control over our work are really valid. And the feelings that we get when we put it out in front of other people and they say, well, here's what I think. It's like, there's a lot. So listen, in my role as a mentor to writing students near and far, I give notes all the time. I give feedback all the time. I give feedback to students in the Path of the Storyteller program. I give students in my Storyteller circle feedback, really deep feedback every week when we meet. And the Storyteller circle is for writers who've been through the Path of the Storyteller program. So they've been really thoroughly trained in story structure and writing craft, and they come to Storyteller Circle to work on their own books. And we see incredible progress and incredible achievement, but it is achieved through the process, the courageous and vulnerable process of sharing work and getting feedback on it. I give feedback to writers when they have me critique a manuscript. Sometimes writers will come to me with just the first 10 pages of something because they really want their opening to be top notch. They want some, expert eyes on it. They want to make sure it's ready for prime time. And it also gives them a really nice diagnostic of where they stand in terms of their writing craft. So just to put this in a perspective, giving feedback, being the person who gives the notes is something that I am very, very, very practiced at. And I know from that experience, like that's a leveraged experience because I go through this all the time with so many writers. I know exactly how it goes and I know exactly what it feels like and what kind of effect that it has on writers. And I also know how absolutely invaluable it can be. So that's part of my framework for giving this talk. And I want to say, one of the most exciting moments that happens in the Storyteller Circle is when somebody actually gets notes and gets feedback and they go away and a couple of weeks later they come back and they've actually revised and they've used the notes and all of a sudden the work pops and it's like, wow, like they've nailed it. And everybody can hear the difference. It's just, you can just feel it in the room, the virtual room. Everybody can feel the difference when somebody really goes for it. So this is something it's quite palpable if you're part of a writing community, the amount of development that can happen in a writer's work if they're open to feedback and they're willing to take it. However, I am also, and proudly so, a working writer myself. And I teach from my practice and I'm in the trenches along with my students. And, this is my opinion, a frequently expressed opinion, but I strongly recommend that anybody out there is seeking mentorship on how to write better fiction. Talk to a working writer. There are a lot of folks out there who give mentorship who are not actually working writers. And so it's a very different experience, right? To be able to have a mentor who's really in the trenches, maybe, ahead of where you are on the path of development. That's the very essence of a mentor, is that they've already gotten the results that you're looking to get. That's who you need to learn from. Okay. So that's just a little word to the wise out there. But as a working writer, I'm in it. And so what's going on in my writing life right now, is some of my students who are here live now, is that I recently got my editorial notes back on the draft of my what's going to be my next published book. And I, am in the process of doing my revision based on my editor's notes. And I have a deadline, and I've got to deal with these notes, and I've got to deal with my feelings, and I've got to figure out a revision plan. I've got to do it. I've got to walk the walk, right? We're not just talking the talk here. I've got to walk the walk. So this topic is very much on my mind right now. It's not just something that I'm talking about in the abstract. It's something that I have gone through with every book that I've written and published. It's something that I've gone through with other types of writing that I've done. I've actually written quite a bit for the theater, talk about getting notes and feedback. If you put something up on stage in front of an audience and it's supposed to be funny and they don't laugh, that's feedback, my friends. If people walk out at intermission, that's feedback. So this is, I've got a long history with this process of giving and receiving feedback. Okay. So I thought about what I'm going through and what I see my students going through, what I know from experience, we all go through in the process of getting notes. And so what I want to talk about is kind of like the steps, kind of like this 5 stages of grief that they talk about. I think I have 5 stages here of what to do when you hear feedback, when you get written feedback, and how to turn all of that into an empowering plan of action, not a collapse under the covers with a pint of ice cream thinking I'll never write again, I'm so devastated. That's not what we want. It's not why we go get feedback. We want to use it as an experience that helps us plan our revision, leverage the feedback that we get from other minds, so we're not just stuck in our own perceptions, and do a better revision than we otherwise could have, because now we've got the perspective of others to make part of our set of data about the work we're trying to revise. So that's our goal today. We want to end up feeling really good. And before I start, I definitely want to point back to Constanzas' great comment that a lot depends on where you are in the process, whether you've asked for feedback and what the source of the feedback is, right? I'm going to talk about that a little as I go through these 5 stages, but please bear in mind, not all feedback is created equal. And it's also okay for it not to be the right time for you to hear other people's ideas on your work, because you're still figuring it out. And that bubble, that protective bubble, that little cone of privacy that you build around your work at certain stages of its development is extremely valid. Protect it, insist upon it. Sometimes people will ask, oh, are you writing something? Can I see it? What's it about? Can I see the beginning? They will ask because they're curious, and often it's people in our lives who want to be supportive. If you are in the season of the cone of silence, of the protective bubble, say, I'm not ready yet. Just smile and say, oh, I appreciate your interest. Thank you for your support. I'm not ready to show it yet. I'll let you know when I am. Just say no, okay? You can say no. Don't get tempted. If you know better, if you know it's not the season for that, don't get tempted, okay? So that's just the little caveat. It's like putting on your safety belt, putting on your seatbelt before you get in the car. All right, seatbelts on. Let's talk about this. So the first thing that I want everyone to really understand is that when you get feedback, regardless of the source, you can expect to feel resistance to it. It's very rare in my experience, and maybe I'm just stubborn, but it's also very rare in my own experience of working with writers, that somebody doesn't have on some level a stress reaction to getting feedback. Now, why this is fascinating. There's something about the experience of being evaluated, appraised, criticized, that makes us feel somewhat attacked. And it's not a literal attack because we're not getting attacked. It's not even us. It's words on a page. It's something that we made. I mean, if I made you a piece of toast and I left it in the panini press too long, which I'm often in the habit of doing because I'm absent-minded, and I burned it, I would say, oh, I think I burned it. This is too brown for you, right? And you would say, yeah, could you do another one? And I would make you another one. And it wouldn't feel like a personal attack because it's not me, it's the toast. But there's something about our writing that feels like us. You know what I'm talking about. It feels like us. In our heads, we experience ourselves as this like stream of impressions, a stream of self-narrating. We talk to ourselves in our heads. We imagine conversations with people who are not in the room. It's what consciousness feels like. And writing, when we put it on the page, it feels like consciousness because that's sort of what we're duplicating, the stream of thought, the chatter, the imagined dialogue, the fluctuation of emotions. So to me, this is the reason why that we just somehow feel like it's our consciousness on the page as opposed to some draft of some book that we're still working on. If you can think of it as toast, you're going to be much better off. So that's one of the things I want you to take away today. It's okay. It's just a piece of toast. You can always make another one. But what happens when we feel attacked? What happens? You know what happens. It causes a stress reaction. Our nervous system does what our nervous system is designed to do. And this is pretty well documented. And we even had a live stream about this. There's fight, there's flight, there's freeze, and there's fawn. There are nervous system responses to the stress of feeling attacked. If you are inclined to have a fight response, this is purely temperamental. A lot of it has to do with our personalities, how we were raised. You know, some of us are fighters, some of us freeze, some of us tend to fawn, some of us flee. We all have like our preferred response, our habitual response, or it might depend on our mood or who it is that's coming at us. But if you're a fighter under stress, your first reaction is going to be to defend yourself. And you're going to explain what you meant, right? You're going to defend the choices that you made. And you can see this in critique groups and writing groups. You can see it all the time, that there will be a handful of writers who know that they're not supposed to defend themselves. They're just supposed to listen, take notes, thank the person for the feedback that they're getting, you know, but they can't help themselves. And they will right away say, well, no, you're not actually, what you're asking about is in the previous chapter, or I'm going to get to that in a couple of pages, or this is what I was thinking. Maybe I wasn't clear enough, but you know, you guys are not really getting what I meant. Like, so they kind of defend and explain. And what I've seen happen, because I've been part of many writing workshops, is that, you know, they'll all go to the bar after the workshop and say, well, I don't really think that teacher knows what she's talking about. You know, they'll just kind of get into that devaluing the source. It's just a form of fighting off, right? The nervous system is fighting it off. This is normal. This is normal. It doesn't sound like really attractive behavior when I describe it, right? But I just want to say it's quite normal and it happens all the time. And it's your nervous system doing what your nervous system wants to do. So that's a fight response. A flight response, you know, sometimes they get an email from someone who's coming up and they're going to get their piece critiqued. And they're like, you know what? I think, isn't there someone else who needs to go? I think I'm just going to postpone my critique. I'm not quite ready. They'll just say, I'm not going to put myself, or I'm not going to sign up for the opportunity to have feedback, or I'm just never going to ask. I'm not going to share my work. So that's a kind of a flight from the fear of the experience. But the other thing that happens, and I'm telling you, every writer can relate to this. If you get written notes from someone, if you get an editorial letter from someone who's done, say, a paid critique of your manuscript, or from an editor's, I recently got an editorial letter from my editor. It might take you 2 days to open that email. You're like, I don't want to look. You're not ready yet. You know, you're resisting. It's okay. This might not sound like the most mature response, but it's completely normal. And it's not really something you have conscious control over. It's your nervous system doing what your nervous system is designed to do. You sensing a theme here? The freeze response, I see it happen. Somebody's there and they're nodding and smiling and they're taking notes at they're writing down everything that everyone's telling them. And you can just sort of tell that they've checked out. They're not really hearing it anymore. It's like they've got tunnel vision. The world has gone blurry. It's just overwhelming. The stress of hearing notes is overwhelming, and they go into that sort of freeze response. This is why we often encourage people to not worry, take notes. We always have a replay when we give notes. You can always go back and watch the video again. When I give notes to a client, they get a massive set of editorial notes from me, and they get written comments on the manuscript. Like, I'm not going to allow them to forget what I told them. It's going to be well documented, because again, this is completely normal. Now, here's another element, I think, of the freeze response that I hear a lot, which is kind of like that playing possum response, kind of like rolling over and playing dead. That as soon as the person starts to hear feedback, they just collapse. They're like, well, I guess I'm no good. I don't know how to do that. I'm going to quit. I wish someone else could do this for me. That they just become very self-effacing. They just kind of, they surrender. They start waving the white flag of surrender right away as part of their coping with getting notes. That it's just something that starts to come out, and it's tough, because people want to help, and nobody wants to cause distress. No healthy person wants to cause distress in the person they're speaking to, right? If we feel that we're hurting someone, we back off. And so one of the difficulties of this kind of response, really any of these responses, but particularly this one, is that you start to feel like, well, that's as far as we can go now, because that person is already like surrendering. And so, you must maybe miss the opportunity to really get the feedback that you came for, if that's what feels, if that's what your nervous system does to protect you from this sort of false sense of attack. And the last one, and obviously resistance to notes is a huge topic, so I sort of broke it down and spending a few minutes on it here. The fawn response, which is a very interesting one, it's kind of like a people-pleasing response. And this can be dangerous, because what happens is that this is the writer who seems like they're taking the notes so well, and they're loving it, and they're thanking everyone, and they're super charming. They're super grateful. If it's a one-on-one situation, they'll be like effusively thankful for it. All that is great. I mean, gratitude is fantastic. Charm is fantastic. All of it is fantastic. But if that writer is basically fawning and feeling like they've got to people please the folks who are giving them notes, to the point where they can no longer be discerning about what they're being told about their work, we're going to have a problem, because that writer is going to feel like, well, everyone gave me notes, and that was very nice of them. And now, as part of my expression of gratitude, I have to go and take everything that everyone told me and put it in my book. This is not a good response to feedback. Okay. You're going to need to be discerning. And I'm going to get specific today about how to sort of be discerning about the feedback you get. But I just want to note for all of you the different ways that your nervous system could trick you into responding to the notes, and how you might then misinterpret the experience of getting feedback. You might feel people didn't get what you were intending. You might feel I don't even want to look at the notes that I got because I feel overwhelmed. You may not process them, or you may feel obligated to take them all out of gratitude. And I just want you to look at all those different responses just as manifestations of resistance. They in themselves don't have a meaning. It's just the way your nervous system took care of you the day that you read your notes or got your notes. Okay. So what do you do instead? Just listen, just read, just take it in, don't throw away any emails full of notes, don't do what you can to get through the experience. Forgive yourself for whatever your nervous system does on the day, and then you wait. So So this is the second thing that I want to talk about. You must give your nervous system time to calm down, because it's a biological phenomenon. When you are having a stress response, you cannot think your way out of it. Your hormonal balance has to change. Your breathing has to change. Your heart rate has to go back to normal. And all of the thoughts that are now racing in your head, whether they're aggressive thoughts or self-effacing thoughts, or uh, hiding under the covers thoughts, all those thoughts have to also settle down, because they are not real either. All right. Everything just has to settle down. You have to get back to some kind of stasis. So you give your nervous system time to calm down. Now, it's not an unusual piece of advice that you should sleep on your notes. When someone gives you notes, you should sleep on it. You should give it a little time. But what I want to do here is I want you to really understand why that's good advice. It's not just you need more time to think about them, because that sounds abstract and cerebral and intellectual. And we are not abstract, cerebral, intellectual beings. Even though we're writers, we're human beings with bodies and nervous systems and unconscious reactions to things. So when I say give your nervous system time to calm down, it's not that I'm saying you need a couple of days to think about the notes. I'm saying, no, give your nervous system time to calm down, right? Whatever your first response was, it's just resistance. And if you keep looking at the notes while you're still in that state, you are going to distort your response. You're going to say, these notes are terrible. You're going to say, the person who told me this was an idiot. You're going to say, I'm an idiot. I don't even understand what they're telling me. I don't know what to do with these notes. Right? You're going to have all kinds of responses. And the more you repeat them, the more solid they become. And they're all just smoke. Just let it dissipate. Okay. Let it dissipate. It's really easy to keep ourselves agitated once we're agitated. Right? This is not just true of writing. So don't work to keep yourself agitated. Let go of it. All right. Some examples, the first reaction that so many writers will have to notes is like, they didn't get it at all. I'm so disappointed. I feel like, I showed it to folks and they didn't really even understand, and they don't know what they're doing. And honestly, when your nervous system calms down, and a couple of days later, you're going to look at them, you're going to say, these people are geniuses. They could see exactly, what I was doing. This is going to be so helpful. Your perception is going to flip to its opposite. And that's true also if your reaction was, I have no idea how to fix the 1,001 things that everyone thinks is wrong with my terrible, terrible work written by an idiot who's me, right? Like, if that's your response, also give it a day or two, and you are going to find that you are filled with ideas, and you're going to wake up and you're going to say, wait a minute, I think I do know how to fix that, right? So just get out of your own way, give it time, and give it forgiveness, and have some discipline. We should never, ever, ever fire off an email to anyone while we are in that state. All right. Even writing that email, people say, oh, write an email, but don't send it. Even writing that email is a way to keep yourself agitated. So I'm saying, resist the urge to keep yourself agitated. Don't keep yourself agitated. Just let it wash over you. Okay. It's going to change so quickly. How you feel is going to change very, very quickly. So under no circumstances engage in any kind of professional correspondence when you're still like worked up about the notes. And also, if you were in a situation where you were given notes in person and you don't like how you behaved, you feel self-conscious now that you didn't handle it gracefully, and maybe you said things that you didn't mean, that's okay, because we don't mean what we say when we are in that agitated mode. That's our nervous system doing what our nervous system does. Nobody else cares what you said. Nobody else even remembers how you behave. So you can drop that too. I hope this is helpful. Please just don't worry about any of that. All right. Can we actually talk about the notes themselves now? Let's talk about the notes themselves. The notes that you get from people, are going to be wide-ranging, and they're going to depend a lot on the level of expertise and technical vocabulary of the person that's giving you the notes. So if the person who's giving you the notes doesn't have any particular expertise, they're just a reader, they're going to talk to you about it very differently than a fellow writer is going to talk to you about it. And a fellow writer who doesn't have the same technical vocabulary you do is going to use different words to talk about it. So we have a kind of a Tower of Babel situation here, where the notes that you get may be coming at you in a variety of dialects. And what you are going to have to do is to translate them into your own technical vocabulary, the one that you use to work. So bear that in mind. You don't have to adopt the way of thinking or talking about the work that the person who's giving you notes comes to you with. If they come to you with like a lot of screenplay terminology, you don't have to say, well, I don't have a dark night of the soul or an inciting incident, or you don't have to adopt any of that. They're talking in their technical vocabulary. You have your own way of thinking about your work. So you don't have to panic that you've got to add all their things into what you're already doing. They're just using their language. If they're just a reader, they're only going to talk about their feelings, right? I liked it. I didn't like it. I thought it was slow. I was scared at this part. I was bored at this part. If you can find an intelligent reader who's able to talk about their feelings with that kind of precision, it's extremely valuable. But just know that they may be vague to the point where it's not terribly useful. And so if you're just showing it to readers who are not writers, who are just going to tell you whether they liked it or not, take it with a grain of salt. You may, through some kind of side door, get a really, really interesting bit of feedback that could be really, really helpful. But that is really like, you don't know what you're going to get. They're going to be inclined to tell you that they liked it because they obviously know you well enough that you felt comfortable asking them to read it. So chances are there's a friendship bond there. So just know that's good. They're going to tell you that they liked it, but don't then go back and get like really well-informed comments and say, but my friend Sarah liked it. It's like, well, Sarah's your friend. That's what she told you. Like, she doesn't know how to tell you anything else, If they can pinpoint spots where they thought it was boring, where they thought it was exciting, stuff that they liked, characters that they want, that they liked, that's all great. Just take it with a little space around it. So what are the most important notes you're going to get? The notes about the story are the most important notes that you will get. However, they are going to come in disguise because very few people are going to be able to give you story structure notes that are in a technical language about story structure. What people are going to come at you with are maybe questions about character. So you might get questions about character. You might get notes about, I don't understand why this character did this, or you might get notes about this seemed out of character. I thought this character was one way, but in this scene, they seem to be different than that. So you might get notes about character. And I want you to think of any notes about character as being actually about the story, because what you're looking for is, did the hero's journey of change ring? Was it audible to the reader? Did they see that something changed? Did they care about it? If they don't find the story that engaging, or they felt that it was a little, it got a little dull at points, or the pace was slow, you're getting story notes, right? You're getting story notes. You're getting notes about, are the stakes high enough? Is the plot like clear enough? Is the goal of the hero clearly delineated and actively pursued enough to engage the reader? So this is what I mean when I say that story notes are going to have a tendency to come in disguise. They're going to come disguised as notes about character and notes about pace. They may come wrapped in a like, well, the ending, I think the ending could be better, or it sort of took a long time to get started, these kinds of things, right? Or if the middle was slow. These are story notes. So you can't actually solve the problems that are being described in the way that the person is describing them. This is an example of how you have to translate the notes you're getting into an actual technical vocabulary. All right. So these are going to be the story notes in disguise. You're also going to get writing craft notes. So I want you to sort out when you get your editorial feedback, like which are the story notes and which are the writing craft notes. Because even a reader who's not like super technically skilled is going to respond to the story like, it interested me, it didn't interest me. I cared about the character, I didn't care about the character, right? And those are really valid things for you to address skillfully through an understanding of story structure. You're going to fix them using the tools you have to improve the story structure, right? Writing craft is a bit of a different kettle of fish, because a lot of people will say particular things that might sound like advice on how to write it differently. And I have to tell you, I see a lot of really, and I say this with love, really terrible advice about writing craft, even from writers to other writers. And here's why. When the writing isn't quite working, or we want to give some kind of note, we want to give some kind of feedback on the writing, we tend to describe it in terms of what's lacking. Like, I couldn't really visualize the characters. I wished I knew more about what the room looked like. I wish I knew more about what this looked like, or, I really liked this secondary character. I could have, like, I liked it when they had great conversations. I could have used more of that fun stuff. So people will give you instructions to write more. They will almost exclusively give you instructions to write more, describe more things, tell me more. But what are they saying? They're saying it wasn't vivid enough. They were having trouble imagining it. And in order to make things more vivid, almost always the key is to subtract things. And so this is why I say, don't take writing craft notes literally. If people are giving you advice, like, could you describe that more? Could you tell us more about that? Like, they feel that that's encouraging. They're asking you for more. Like, I liked it, I wanted more. But adding more is, for many, many, many writers, it's not the good advice. Because these writers will be very obedient, and they'll add more description, they'll make dialogue scenes longer, they'll start to feel like they've got to describe everybody according to their eye color and hair color and what they're wearing in every scene. None of this helps tell the story. And it all tends to make, that story that's in there kind of gasping for air less vivid, not more vivid. So please consider that when you get notes about the writing, that it may in fact be to your benefit to do the opposite of what they're telling you. I realize this sounds frustrating, but we have to really take responsibility for interpreting the notes that we get. And I'm going to circle back to that in a minute. Okay. You really need to consider the source. If you know that the person who's giving you notes has a really good command of writing craft, and they can give you specific things like, I see that you've described things here that we don't need described. You've spent, a lot of time on a dialogue scene that doesn't actually, that what they're talking about doesn't become important until the second page of them talking. Maybe you can cut this chit chat. If they can really tell you, if it's a fellow practitioner, if it's a colleague in a critique group where everyone's really savvy and they really can talk the talk, That's awesome. That can be super helpful. But you do have to consider the source and be wary of just making a list, a people-pleasing list of saying, well, so-and-so needed to know what color this character's hair was, so let me put it in here. And this other one wanted to know what her room looked like, so let me put it in there. You know what I mean? Like, you just ticking them off the boxes. It's not always helpful to do that. So I'm going to move on to my fifth little category here, which is the red flag notes. These are the notes that should always raise a red flag for you. What are they? Anytime someone talks about it needs to flow, that's a red flag, because that doesn't mean anything. And it's something that writers become really concerned about. Like, does the writing flow? That's not what they mean. They mean, does the story move forward? Does the story drag the reader, like, from page to page to page in order to find out what happens? But that's not how most people will say it, because they don't have the technical vocabulary. They'll say, does the writing flow? And so when you start to hear about flow, it starts to feel like, oh, it needs to be smoothed out. And that is the opposite of what we want it to do. We want it to be vivid, right? We want it to be like constantly engaging the reader, waking them up, like getting them excited to find out what happens next. It's the opposite of smoothing out and flowing. So anything about flow, it might have to do with story, I would say. It's most likely to have to do with story. Anything having to do with likability, relatability. If someone says, I didn't think your main character was very nice, that is a red flag. Ebenezer Scrooge is not very nice, but he is a superb protagonist of the novel that gave rise to him, right? Our main characters do not have to be nice. They can be really problematic figures. That's fine. So if someone comes to you with a bit of a, like a little opinion about these people aren't very nice, that's a red flag. I would sort of put that aside. Or personal taste. Someone might come to you and say, I just don't like science fiction stories. I just can't read them. They don't really make sense to me. I don't get it. I like realistic stories, Well, that person's not the greatest reader for your science fiction epic. Find somebody whose taste lines up with what you've offered them. So don't worry about those notes. That's just kind of a red flag that you don't have to take that one too seriously. Similarly, another red flag is anybody who's making sort of moral judgments about any of the characters. Because and I say this as a children's book author, so I can say it with some conviction, even when we're writing for young readers, our job is not to make sure that every single character on the page is an example of moral fiber that we want our children to imitate. That is not good storytelling. There are books like that, perhaps, and maybe some children are forced to read them. But that's not good storytelling, and children deserve really good storytelling that puts complicated characters into interesting situations with moral dilemmas, coming up against real forces of opposition, having to deal with the complexities of life, learning and growing, just like the protagonist of any other story. So I do not think that you should pay any attention to people who have that kind of like opinion that all books should be instruction manuals for life. There goes literature, if we start to listen to that. So that's another set of notes I would definitely put a red flag around. The other thing that we want to put a little red flag next to is a pitch. What's a pitch? A pitch is when somebody comes to you and says, I had a great idea. This was really good, but what if? What if you did this? Like, what if this character ended up actually like being her long lost sister? And they start to weave like a version of your story that you may not even recognize. And, maybe they make it sound interesting. And you should say, well, that's so interesting. You should write that story. But you don't have to take it seriously if it's a pitch, because all you're hearing is that your story made them think of a story that's got nothing to do with your story. So those are all red flags, okay? However, when I say put them to the side, don't take them that seriously, maybe you can ignore them, I really don't mean to ignore them. Here's what I mean when something is a red flag note. They mean that when your reader, the person who's giving you the notes, got to that part of your manuscript, that they were so like tenuously engaged in the story that they very easily got distracted by their own train of thought. They were not immersed in your storytelling. They were thinking about whatever it was they were thinking about. They were thinking about flow and likability and moral fiber and coming up with their own subplots about long lost sisters. So if nothing else, those types of notes tell you where this particular reader wasn't that engaged in your story. And I recommend that you look at the places where those notes, become activated, and see if you can figure out why this person wasn't really paying attention, why they were so easily distracted by their own critical faculties at that point. Because chances are there's something there that you can make stronger. The mark of a really, really good book, and this happens a lot of times, sometimes when we're doing a group critique, right? When we've got like a critique group situation, or as we do in the Storyteller Circle, we call them hot seats, that people will say, I got so caught up in it, I forgot to think of what I wanted to tell you. Like they sort of forgot to take notes because they got so caught up in it. That's what we want to have happen. So if people are like coming up with lots of comments, even though the comments are sort of red flag type comments, it's just telling you that they weren't as caught up in it as you want them to be. So look at the places where there's maybe something that you can define that could be better. And the last thing that I want to mention is particularly about the kind of notes that you're going to get. And just to quickly go back, right? We talked about, first the resistance and giving your nervous system time to come down, looking for the story notes, even though they may come in disguise. Look at the writing craft notes, but also consider the source and interpret them into your own technical vocabulary. Identify the red flag notes and know that you don't really have to do what they're telling you to do, but also take them as like a signal to examine through your own critical framework the places where those notes, got stimulated in the mind of a person. And here's the last one, and this is the easiest one. Identify the low-hanging fruit. If somebody said, I noticed on this page that you said this twice, or, just sort of super simple technical things, fixes like that, a lot of people will be eagle-eyed and give you feedback that it's super helpful. It's not necessarily, what we need in terms of making substantive changes in a revision, but it's super helpful, and that's the low-hanging fruit, and you should be very grateful for it. Okay, so that's what you're going to get. You're going to get story notes that don't look like story notes, writing craft notes that you may or may not follow in the way they're given to you, red flag notes that you are not going to follow, but you will investigate, and the low-hanging fruit, which are these sort of useful small corrections. Okay. Now, when I go through this, that's pretty much all of the types of notes that you're going to get from other people. And as I say, this is true on every level, right? Now, what do you do with them, right? You have to approach revision with all of this feedback somehow sorted in your head. Now, I have done live streams about like how to revise and the sort of basic idea of fixing the story first, work from big to small, fix the big things first and then work your way down to the low-hanging fruit. And there's a reason for this, obviously, because if we've got story architecture to shift around, like that's like structural work. You want to solve those problems first. And they're the scariest ones, I know, but you want to solve them first because there's just no point fixing the low-hanging fruit in scenes that may end up cutting or substantially revising. It's a bit of a procrastination effort. So that's a piece of advice that I've given in detail on other live streams on this channel, and you can search for those. What I really want to conclude by emphasizing today is this sense of maintaining your being the boss of your book, your identity as the creator of this work, and the one who's going to decide not only which notes to take, but how to interpret the notes that you got, and that ultimately the revision process is not complete when you incorporate everybody else's notes. It's the revision process is stimulated by getting notes from others, and you are the boss of your book, and your plan for revision is now, made better, made richer by the experience of getting other perspectives on your work. But it's still up to you to give yourself the notes that the book needs to decide on the revision plan that you want to make, and to implement it, to actually go in and change stuff and come up with a revised draft. If you just take people's notes, you have in fact, built an elephant by committee, because you're going to get notes from a lot of different sources. And it's your job to like digest all of that stuff, to interpret it, to winnow through it, and then out of that to create your plan for revision. It's almost as if you have to write yourself the editorial letter in the end, but it will be a different one because you have now been through the process of grappling with all of this feedback. Even if in the grappling you decided like, oh, I know what she meant, that's not what I'm going to do, but I'm going to fix the real reason that she said that, right? That you have to be able to take responsibility. Ultimately, the revision that you do is your responsibility. The choices that you make are because you chose to make them. And when I hear people, and I do hear writers say this, that one of the reasons that they get stressed out about, publishing with big publishers and traditional publishing is that they want to maintain control. They want to maintain control of their work. All I can say is, if you're not maintaining control of your work, that's on you. You're the one who's writing it. If you're getting notes from people, you're the one who's deciding what those notes mean, how those notes help you make your book more of what you want it to be, right? And you are truly the boss of your book. I mean, my Path of the Storyteller students hear me say this a lot. You are the boss of your book, And the only way that you can get in trouble here is if you decide not to be the boss of your book and you allow yourself to just follow instructions from a wide variety of sources without discernment. And then your book is a hot mess at the end, and you think to yourself, see, I lost control of my book. But you didn't. You may have given the control away, right? But you didn't lose it. Nobody took it from you. Now, I want to go to bat here while I'm talking about this, because I did, sort of frame this as being something that I'm working on right now. It traditional publishing gets a bad rap, but the notes that you get from a really, really seasoned and experienced editor are tremendously helpful. Do I, as an author, go through the same process? Of course I do. I go through and I say, well, I understand why she's saying that. I think she's onto something. I'm going to fix it in a different way. But it's the same process, but the seriousness of intent and the experience and the insight and the intelligence of of editors who are really doing a lot of work with really good writers, and this is their job. This is their level of expertise. And I just want to say that it's just really important to acknowledge that, because I'm stunned sometimes by how often I see writers who have never published anything say, well, traditional publishing, they don't know what they're doing. I'm like, really? Do you think so? And this kind of focus on like, I need to maintain control. It's like, how you maintain control of your work? You maintain control of your work by being really skillful, by doing the work to master your craft, understand story structure, understand writing craft, know that you've got the tools and the know how to use them, so that if somebody gives you feedback, you have a framework through which to say, okay, I totally get why they're telling me that, and I know just how to fix it. It's not what they're thinking I should do, But when I fix it, they're going to read it and they're going to go, oh, you fixed it. It's on you to maintain control of your work by being a skillful writer. That's the way to do it. And if you don't do the work and you're sort of continually like, well, my editor will fix it, or I'll hire an editor to, I'll give them my draft, or I'll hire somebody to fix it for me. You're giving away your power. So I'm on the writer's side in all things, as you guys know. And I say this not to make you feel like you don't know anything. You all know a lot. You all know a tremendous amount. But I just want you to remember that in fact is where your power comes from. It comes from being the expert in the room. Expertise is a really valuable thing to have. And when you're the writer, you're the expert on your book. You're absolutely the boss of it. All right, guys, thank you so much for staying with me during this talk. I'm going to take a moment to look at the comments. So if there's stuff that you've wanted to comment and you haven't posted it yet, this would be really a good time. Oh, Cheryl's here. It's so nice to see you, Cheryl. So often our writing is soul work. Indeed, it is, right? All the more reason to put yourself in a situation where you can be the boss of it. And it's that confidence, that makes us able to process and hear the feedback that we will get from the world. Anne is here and has a great comment. Anne shares, the biggest challenge for me is being open to feedback and really wrapping my head around what's being said. Takes a while. That's right, Anne, because our nervous systems get all distracted, right? And being honest with myself about what I think of the feedback. That's right. Sometimes someone you admire tremendously gives you feedback. You think, I don't think that was useful. And sometimes someone that you didn't think had much to offer typically could give you the most brilliant comment. It's really up to you to be discerning. Nancy has posted a comment that I really love. The fawn response is fascinating. It's new to me. After being critiqued, I tend to fawn and then collapse in private. These are such words of wisdom. Oh, Nancy, I'm glad that was able to give you a little insight. I do think that this is a very common response, right? That we allow our nervous systems to protect us by feeling we've got to, please everyone. But we all know what happens and then we go home. That wasn't the whole story, right? All of that charm and gratitude. Nancy's also thinking about joining a critique group. Really interesting. And I'll be interested to know what you decide. And Anne has a great comment here. Anne says she's finding out that as I spend more time sitting down and actually writing and outlining, which is a new venture. Good for you, Anne. Past feedback is starting to make more sense. Oh, this is fantastic, right? Sometimes we get the same feedback over and over and over again, and we just get so sick of being told the same thing because either we think we're doing it or we don't really know what they mean. And then Anne does what, I'm kind of encouraging everyone to stay focused on, is that as she improves her technical proficiency, things start to make sense. That's really great. And it's a really good sign. Simone is here. Great to see you, Simone. Enjoyed this talk, and it helps to understand yourself as a writer. Keep learning and growing from feedback. Yeah, it did. Nancy laughed a lot during this talk. Really, Nancy? I'm so glad you found it amusing. It's a tough topic. It addressed many questions I've had as if you were in my head. Yeah, well, I'm in your YouTube, but I'm not in your head. Very good, Nancy. You're quite welcome. All right, gang, thanks so much for being here. Thanks to all of you who are here live and left such great comments. If you're watching the replay, you can leave a comment below this video and we can keep the conversation going. If you are not subscribed to this YouTube channel, please subscribe. That would be a huge help to me. If you like the content, give it a thumbs up. That's also a big help. If there's something you want me to talk about on a future live stream, you can leave that in the comments too. I do love hearing what's on your minds. All right, guys, I will see you next time, and I'll look forward to it. Until then, happy writing.